Hey guys, welcome to the first Finctum Languages podcast. I have Jonathan Seabolt from Langcast. Is that how you say it? Langcast?
Yep. Yeah, Langcast.
Alright. And I don't know, I shouldn't say this is really my first podcast. I don't know. This is my first one, but I don't know exactly how these are going to go. I'm just interviewing people on this show. So I'm really excited to have Jonathan. So why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about yourself, your channel. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so initially that channel I had specifically started to practice Esperanto. And I once I got, a little bit more established in Esperanto and I realized I wanted to branch out and learn more than just one language, I decided to change it to an overall language learning channel. And then I was looking around online because I was like, I really want to get into language podcasts, like who does them, what can I do, I want to listen, things like that.
Right.
And it seemed like every podcast was like language tips and tricks, which is perfectly fine.
Yeah, like my channel.
Right, yeah, and that's super cool.
Right, yeah, I get you.
But and me and you have discussed this before. Like, I love just talking about languages.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be tips and tricks. I
For
love
sure.
the phonetics behind it. I love the, just the idea of conversation. And so I just wanted to maybe start something that would have tips and tricks, but then also have just people talking about just the love of conversation.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. And I totally get that. Like, obviously I'm a linguistics major, so every part of that fascinates me. And you normally don't, unless you are a linguistics major, you don't think about all of the crazy stuff that goes into a very simple, what would seem to be a very simple conversation. Like,
Right.
for us to talk right now, there has to be, I have to think of what I'm going to say in my brain. Like, I have to come up with some kind of, whatever message it is that I want to convey to you. And then I have to, in my brain, form the right words that I want to say. And then I need to send those messages from my brain to my tongue and my mouth and my lungs. All those have to work together in conjunction perfectly. And then I have to move my tongue in a certain way that creates a certain sound wave that travels through the air. So literally, this is just information that is encoded within air pressure and, patterns of air pressure. Then, well, in our case, then it has to go through electronic signals, recreate those same sound waves again. Then they have to reach your ear. And now we have the problem of, like, how does the human body somehow interpret these patterns of air pressure, and then they get interpreted by your eardrums, go into your brain, and then you have to somehow make sense of the words that I chose, and you have to understand those within context, and it's just way more complicated than we think languages actually are.
Yeah, you're right, and because that's the thing too. They always tell you you're not translating. I'm trying to think of an example. Well, in Esperanto, for example, Kiel vi fartas does not literally mean "how are you," but that's how it's interpreted. So.
Right. It's almost like, I don't know, it would be like, how do you fare, or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So and of course, just what we're used to in English is how do you do, how are you, that type of thing. And so they're just like, well, if you say that, that's pretty much what it means. Yeah.
Or like in, a lot of languages, you don't ask how old you are. That would be really weird and probably offensive to certain people. How old are you? It's not that. It's how many years do you have,
How many years do you have? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That was one of the biggest things in Spanish that got me, was learning ¿Cuántos años tienes?
Right.
Or something like that, because it's so... English seems to be one of the only languages that does that.
Yeah.
That I've found, anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Then you don't have how, it's not I'm hot, it's I have heat.
I have heat. I have hunger.
Yeah. So anyways, we're getting off into tangents already, which is fine. I just love talking about languages in general. But specifically, in this podcast, I want to talk about the benefits and the potential consequences of dabbling in a ton of languages. So I watched one of your videos a few weeks, maybe a month or so ago, where you have your 10 languages that you most want to learn. And those are just your 10 languages that you want to learn most, right? Like,
right.
Presumably after you learn those, you would want to go on to more languages.
Oh yeah.
And this is...
Those are the ones that I felt would be more. And honestly, I had to write the list down because that fluctuates as the day goes.
Right. Yeah, I totally feel that, for sure.
Those are what I would find to be most useful for me.
Yeah. And, you know, I just thought that was a funny video to watch for me personally, because for people like you and me, this makes total sense. We love languages, you know, but for the average American or the average human being, well, for sure for the average American at least, they would just be happy to speak one other language, you know, at a mediocre level. So it's just funny to, you know, talk to people who are like, oh yeah, I would love to speak 10, 12 languages. So why don't you give us a little rundown of your language history? Like just tell us every language that you have spent time learning. Whether that be like, you know, a one day on Duolingo or, you know, high school courses or whatever it may be.
Okay. The first ever language that I started studying was Spanish. I took it in high school, and this was before I had actually come to realize that I wish now, knowing how much I was going to love it, I wish I would have actually tried in high school, because then I wouldn't be trying to learn, or, you know, learning Spanish now. But,
right.
So Spanish, the second language I ever studied, and I actually got really, really good at, was Japanese. And I can't speak it at all now. And I know that sounds like such a that sounds like such an easy thing for a linguist to lie about. Like, oh, I used to be able to speak it, now I can't. Right. But the problem, I got to where I could speak at about a 4 or 5 year old level.
Okay.
But the problem is, where I live, there's nobody that speaks Japanese.
Right.
And this was in 2009 when I started learning, and I don't think italki was around then, and it was it was much harder to find people to practice with.
Right. Have you used italki before?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's something I've always wanted to try out, but never really got around to doing.
It's super cool. I like it a lot. I'm a big believer that not necessarily overexposure early, but definitely learning real conversation and not computer generated conversation is completely different.
Sure.
So Japanese, which I can still say a couple of things, but not anything of use really. I can say like I'm hungry and thirsty, and actually get those two confused. So,
yeah.
So Japanese. Then from there, I moved on to. I took a little bit of time off from that. I don't remember exactly what was next, but basically from 2009 to now, I've studied Spanish, Japanese. Well, let me start with Esperanto, because that's actually one I can actually speak.
Okay.
Not perfectly, obviously, but
yeah.
I finished the Duolingo course, and
Sure.
I'm adding vocabulary here or there. And then the next best one would be my Spanish, but I've studied Russian, Polish, Czech, or dabbled, we'll say.
Yeah.
Czech, Hungarian, Turkish, because I have a love of Slavic languages. I love them.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
I've Mandarin. I've never looked into Cantonese or anything like that, or any of the other dialects, but specifically Mandarin. Vietnamese is actually probably the language that I would love to learn the most.
Really?
Yeah, I have a massive infatuation with Vietnamese. I love the Vietnamese people. Like they've always been super nice to me, and they want to help you. Like if you go on italki and you put that you're learning Vietnamese, within 24 hours you'll have 100 messages in your inbox. They're just like, let me help you. Let me help you. I'm trying to think of any of the other, like Korean. I've studied a little bit. I actually got really into Korean because I had a buddy that taught English in Korea.
Okay.
For 2 years, and so I wanted to speak to him. Even I can obviously speak to him in English, but he's the only other friend I have that lives near or used to live near me, loves languages, and I was like, let's learn to speak something. Malaysian or Malay, or no, I'm sorry, Indonesian. So I think that's mostly it from the Eurasia side. Well, and then obviously French, German. Good
Wow.
Lord, I'm trying to think. Oh, and I love Scandinavian languages. I'm actually currently, the other language that I'm learning. I have 2 languages this year: a main and a kind of a side language to like refresh when I need to escape the main one, and that's Norwegian. So
okay,
I think that touches most bases. I think.
Yeah, that's a lot of languages. Like most people are not that nerdy, you know. Like like
I love it.
You know, it's funny. I get, especially with Esperanto. You know, I get, why would you want to speak that many? Like, everyone understands why you would want to speak Spanish, right?
Right.
And then, like, even with French to some extent, people are like, well, like, how often do you run into someone that speaks French? Well, I do, because I travel to Canada and to France, you know. But especially for Esperanto, you know, when you tell people what Esperanto is, because they don't always know, and then you tell them, and they look at you like, so
why would you do that?
Like, why? Yeah, but they're not nerds, right? Like, or you know, or maybe they are a nerd and they just don't. They're not as nerdy as me. I don't know, but
what's funny about Esperanto is I've had more conversations in a fictional made-up language than I have in any real language.
Yeah, the Esperanto community is super accepting. They're very friendly, and they're all language. Almost all of them, I feel like, are interested in languages to some extent. They might not speak a whole bunch of other languages, but
I think the problem is, and I kind of ran into this myself, once I got into Esperanto, it became, instead of being like, okay, now I can speak it, it became, I don't want to study anything else. I just want to perfect this. And it's really weird.
Yeah, it is weird. Yeah. So anyways, we've both spent a lot of time dabbling in a lot of... So you mentioned a ton of languages there. How many of those did you actually spend a good amount of time learning, and how many were just like, I don't know, a day or 2?
Sure. So Japanese and Spanish obviously I've spent the most time on. And then the next one that I've spent the most time on is probably a toss-up between French or German.
Gotcha.
I actually did a challenge a long time ago where I was trying to learn, I think 25, I did it for 2 weeks. I learned 25 German words a day, which really isn't a lot. It does stack up and add on, obviously, but and it was super easy to do, and then I kind of just fell off. But now I also language and stuff like that super quick. But French, I studied a lot. I actually used Rosetta Stone for French, and I know people crap on Rosetta Stone, man, but the only 2 languages that I've used it for are French and Japanese, and they worked really well.
Really?
I understand the people's hatred on it, but they worked really, really well for me. So I would say, as far as those would be the ones that I've studied the most, like more so than just like a week or so at a time. I know for a fact Polish was literally just a week because I had gotten burnt out on Esperanto at the time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I want to study something new. And I took a week off, and I was like, I'm going to study Polish for a week because I'd never studied it, just to kind of reset my brain configuration. And then I came back, and Esperanto was a breeze because Polish is hard as crap also. Yeah. So
that's kind of what I did with Toki Pona when I was learning Spanish and Esperanto. Yeah, so, you know, did you feel like it affected you at all as far as, like, you were on a roll with learning the Esperanto or whatever, and then you took a break and started learning something completely different? Did it set you back at all, or?
Well, I think, I don't know, man. I'm kind of, I don't know how to feel about it, because honestly, I think that the best thing that happened to me, like, because I actually recently made a video about like language burnout and stuff like that. And I think dabbling in that instance helped me, because I was getting burnt out on it. And I felt like I was just spinning my tires in mud. I was feeling like I couldn't make any progress. And so you switch to another language that you've never studied, and no matter how hard it is, the beginning is always easy.
Yeah.
Hello.
And interesting.
How are you?
Right. And
nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I like to eat. And it kind of builds that confidence back up. And then, so I think, honestly, I don't know if I think if I would have done it for too long, it would have hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just taking a week away and dabbling in something else, I think it really helped me because it rebuilt my confidence in learning. Because I had just learned something and I had successes instead of getting a question wrong on Duolingo or whatever, you know?
Sure.
I think in that instance it helped me more so than hurt me.
So you view that kind of as like just sort of a short break to like to reset yourself, to unwind a little bit, and to relax and de-stress kind of from your language.
Right.
That's cool. So
now I do think that I don't think that you can do it more than once every so often. So like, I guess, and that's the counter argument. Like, I don't think that you should dabble 2 weeks out of the month.
Right.
You know, I don't, you know, but yeah, I think it's one of those in moderation things. I think it can absolutely be very, very helpful.
Sure. And do you think like, so I don't know, you know, I'm not trying to like lead you on to the answer or whatever. I'm just asking your personal opinion. Like, so you, as a break from your language learning, you chose another language, but could you have chosen another hobby, you think? Like, oh, I'm going to take up, I don't know, Frisbee golf or something for 2 weeks.
Right. Well, probably, see, I got, a long time ago, one of my other hobbies, I think it's because I love puzzles. See, I love, like, Rubik's Cubes and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I've always looked at languages as puzzles, and I think why I can just switch to another language is every single language is different, so it's like a different puzzle.
Right.
And that's what I do. You know, people will be like, "Oh, did you play this game? Did you play this game? Did you play this game?" And I'm like, "I haven't, man." And they're like, "What are you doing at night?" And I'm like, "I had to learn 25 new Spanish words." And they're like, "What?"
I know.
And I'm like, "That's what I do for fun. That is fun to me."
Mm-hmm. And that's my argument with Esperanto too. Like, you spend 3 hours a night shooting fictional characters, like, you know, or playing video games, or going on adventures and taking an arrow to the knee, right? Like, this is what I do for fun. You're not becoming a better person by playing Skyrim all night.
Right.
Which, if that's what you want, then more power to you. But like,
I do love some Skyrim, but
right.
When
I love Skyrim.
Priorities, if I have a limited amount of time, languages win every time.
Mm-hmm. But that's, I mean, for me, that's how it is. Like, I don't judge other people if they want to play Call of Duty all night.
Right. I think it's just the thing, especially from Americans, because they're so monolingual. Because most American, I don't want to say we're raised this way, and I don't know how it is, because you're from Wisconsin, and I'm sure it might be a little bit different there, but like from where I'm at in Virginia, like there's a very big mentality of, well, everybody speaks English, so why would I ever learn something else?
Right.
Because there's a big difference if I say something to somebody who understands English. If I say something, it's going to impact them differently if I say the same exact thing, but in their native language.
Right. It's true. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, for most, like, so, you know, you've heard the joke about, like, what is it? If you're trilingual, if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. If you speak 1 language, you're American.
Yep.
Right? Like, so people rip on Americans all the time for not knowing more than 1 language, which, first of all, that's not true. Like, I've been to other countries, plenty of other countries, where people just speak their language and no other language. Now, granted, there are a lot of countries around the world where you do have to know 2 or more languages. But that's not everywhere. United States is not unique in being full of monolinguals.
I think the misconception is that people are like, well, the people who come here speak English, and it's like, well, I mean,
right.
I get that argument, but that's still not, you know.
Right. I don't see. I can't. What am I trying to say here? Like, I don't want to live my life in a completely homogenous way. Like, I want to go experience new things. I want to go to new places. I want to try new things. I want to meet new people. I want to see new cultures. I want to experience new things. And that's a big part of why I love languages, because I love traveling and because I love cultures. I love meeting new people.
You can't, in my opinion, you can have a culture, like you can have it translated to where you would understand it, but it's not, like, you're not going to fully understand that culture until you understand what they're saying from their side of it, like, not just this rough translation into English.
Yeah. Yeah, I have this, I was learning ancient Greek a while back, and so I had this...
that's a language I want to learn, too, for completely different reasons.
It was really interesting to me, yeah. I loved it, but I had this book, this ancient Greek primer book, and one of the first pages, it said, there was this quote, and it was like, it was not part of the text, it was in this like little quote box or something, and it said, every translation is by definition an interpretation. And I just loved that quote, and I printed it out, and I put it on my wall, you know, because it's true. It's like what we were talking earlier. You just can't interpret words like "Kiel vi fartas" or, you know, "Tengo calor" or something like that. No matter what you say in a foreign language, or if you try to translate it into your native language, you're going to be changing it in some subtle way.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, the interpretation aspect of it is pretty harmless when it's just simple phrases like "Kiel vi fartas," but when you're trying to interpret deep texts or something, or I don't know, if you're talking about politics or religion or anything, you know, deep philosophy or anything like that, then you kind of want to be as accurate as you can. I mean, you should want that anyways, no matter what you're saying, but especially in those deep topics.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and that's actually a super good point. I really, really like that. But it's anything that you are saying or learning or speaking or whatever. Yeah, every single translation is absolutely an interpretation because it's how you understand it.
All right. So we got off topic, off the dabbling a little bit again. I'm trying to go back to. I'm trying to remember what we were talking about. So you mentioned that, you took a break from Esperanto to study Polish for a while.
I remember one Polish word.
Oh, yeah?
Dobranoc, which is like good night.
Well, it's funny because I got you beat. I've never studied Polish, but I know how to say dziękuję or dzięki, which is thanks, and kocham cię, which is I love you, and kochamy cię, which is we love you. I'm not sure why I remember those, but...
And I think dzień dobry is hello.
Dzień dobry.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's just funny how, like, people like us, you know, you're getting burnt out on a language, and then your, like, go-to relax and to rejuvenate yourself is studying another language.
Studying something completely different, yeah.
But it's so funny because when you start a new language, there is just something exciting and fun that comes with it. Now, even if it is like a language like Esperanto or Tokipona, like I had no intention of becoming a lifelong Tokiponist when I started learning Tokipona, but I enjoyed learning it so much that I actually learned it twice. Right, I learned it in 2015 and was part of the Tokipona community for like a month or a few weeks, and then forgot everything and learned it again earlier this year.
That's something I want to do.
Yeah, man. I recommend it when you get some time, you know, like you said.
I may do it soon because I'm actually kind of I'm a little bit on a burnout. That's actually why I made that video the other day. Is I'm actually kind of on a little bit of a burnout from Spanish right now because I just went so hard at the beginning.
Right. And it's funny, you know. There are certain languages that I really want to like perfect to a very high level, and then there's other languages that I would just like to, you know, I would love to know them at a very high level, but realistically, I know that's not going to happen. I'm not going to know 20 languages at C2.
C2 level.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely even sure if I've ever actually reached a full C2 in Spanish, which is my strongest second language. I am completely like, I'm very comfortable going to foreign countries. I have a lot of friends that speak only Spanish. You know, I've lived in the culture before, so that's no problem for me. I'm planning on spending a month in Spain this summer.
Nice.
But you know, I think I've lost some since I moved back to the United States, and I think part of that is because when I first came back to the States, I was like gung ho about being bilingual. You know, it was fresh and exciting for me. This was I moved back to the States in 2016. And Spanish was the first language that I ever learned to a really high level. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm so talented, and like women are gonna love me because I'm so skilled and bilingual. You know, girls love sweet skills, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Is that reference old enough? Like, is that recent enough that people are gonna catch that?
Yeah, it should. I would say so.
Girls love sweet skills. They want guys with sweet skills. Okay, sorry. So I was like super excited about being bilingual. And then at some point, like probably about 6 months after I came back to the States, I started learning French. And all of a sudden, being bilingual was no longer like fresh and exciting for me. Spanish was just that language, like everyone studies Spanish, right? Like I can walk down the street to the Mexican restaurant and find people that are fluent in Spanish. That's not exotic. That's not fun. But French, all of a sudden, French became this new exotic and exciting thing to me. And like my Spanish learning definitely went on hold. I was already fluent in Spanish at that time, but I had like pledged to myself that I was going to be watching movies in Spanish every day. I was going to be reading books in Spanish. I was going to be chatting with my friends from El Salvador in Spanish. And then all of a sudden this French like enticed me, and it, you know, it's the language of Descartes and Les Miserables and all these things. And you know, I started reading about French history and stuff, and this, and it's just beautiful. I love the sound of it, especially, I don't know why, I love the sound of Quebecois French.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, you know, French is seen as this, like, really romantic, smooth language, kind of, and I wasn't able to notice this difference at first, but to me, the Quebecois, they just sound like straight up Hicks. Like, it's like That's redneck funny. French to me. And you know, there's various dialects within Quebec, so this is not by any means an across the board generalization. But I don't know if you can tell by the camouflage hat, but that's like kind of the people that I resonate with. And I love all cultures. Like I loved going to France and like enjoying the high culture and everything. But I also I feel like I really resonate with the working class Quebecois. I've been listening to this band recently. I've been listening to them a lot called Les Cowboys Fringants or something along those lines. And they just have this like really thick, like it's just slangy and just folk music. And I love it.
Yeah, French is. I love French, man. That's one I want. It's probably higher on my list to learn.
Yeah,
I love French.
Well, it was really interesting because I was just used to thinking of French music being like really high culture and everything, and then I found this Quebecois music, and it's all, you know, there's a ton of country music from Quebec, which I never thought I would find country.
Yeah, that seems weird.
French country music, but it was really interesting. Yeah, so then French became like this really enticing, exciting language to me. And this past winter, I went to Montreal because I wanted to go practice my French. And while I was there, I went to Chinatown. And for some reason, like as I was walking the streets of this very foreign area to me, and you know, hearing people speak Chinese around me and going into the stores and seeing this exotic food, something inside me just like got excited about Chinese. And then I thought, you know what? Mandarin is definitely going to be the next language I learn. And then all of a sudden, studying French became like this thing that's like, oh yeah, you know, tons of people study French in school, but who speaks Chinese, you know? And like, French is still Indo-European, it's still a Western culture, you know, but and then I started making plans. Sorry, I lost you there for a minute. Yeah, I started making plans to go live in China for a summer, and you know, now this is exciting to me. And I didn't really start learning the language. I kind of nerded out and spent a lot of time learning about the tones in Mandarin. I didn't get super far, but it was funny because I was like in Quebec. Like I went there to practice my French, and all of a sudden I like forgot about that, and I was in Quebec like watching YouTube videos about Chinese tones, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Don't
weird
go
how
into Cantonese, man. Cantonese tones are even worse.
yeah, I hear they have like up to 8 or 9 tones
Because they have, see, Mandarin has your low tone, mid tone, high tone.
Yeah.
Cantonese has low tone, low tone, mid high, high.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Do you get that sense of like just excitement when you start a new language?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, because like once you study something, and I think that's kind of what's happening with Spanish. Is it's like, well, I've technically off and on studied Spanish for a decade, but
right.
it just it's we're American, man. We like new and exciting.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't know. I'm not 100% sure if that's a cultural thing, but we like new and exciting.
Yeah.
And you get so far into something, and then it's almost like it's not special anymore.
Right.
And then especially with, maybe not necessarily French, but especially with like Spanish, like you said, it's so common for people, even though I joke that America is so monolingual, it's so common for people here to speak Spanish that if you learn it, no one really cares.
Right.
Like, that's the way that people act. And actually, that's why I was talking to Moses about that. I was like, why don't you ever speak Spanish in your videos when he does his level up videos?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, because if I go speak to somebody in Spanish, it doesn't get that reaction because it's almost it's almost like that's supposed to happen. Like I'm supposed to know it.
Right. Like native Spanish speakers in America are probably just so used to like sophomore students in high school coming up to them and wanting to practice their Spanish, you know.
Spanish, yep.
Every time we go to a Mexican restaurant, my mom, you know, ever since I was in high school when I was learning Spanish, we go to a Mexican restaurant, my mom's like, Aaron, speak Spanish to the waitress. You know, like...
Yep. And it's so common here, man. And I think that's where I struggle too, like, because I think I can learn Spanish and it can help me with my job and I can maybe make more money, but at the end of the day, would it really?
Yeah, I mean, like, anything that they need a Spanish speaker for, they can go find a native speaker of Spanish, you know?
Yep. That's my struggle with it,
now,
man. Which that's a whole different topic, obviously, right. But that's my struggle. That's where I keep struggling with Spanish, because I really, in a weird way, I don't really want to learn. Like, it's not like when I found Esperanto or Japanese, like something that I actually...
Yeah.
I'll watch Japanese movies all day long.
Right.
And that's kind of where I struggle with Spanish, I think, is because it's more so... There's like an ulterior motive besides just I want to.
Mm-hmm. So you've said you've like taken breaks from one language to start practicing another, but you've spent a good deal of time learning 2 languages at once, correct? Or am I? So how has that process gone for you?
Good. I've always been smart about it, though. I've never studied. I'm not saying people are stupid to do this, but like what works for me, I should say. I've never studied like French and Spanish at the same exact time, or of course, some people can do it. Like, I don't know if you watch Polyglot Progress on YouTube, but they actually are doing a challenge right now of learning Spanish. They've never studied Spanish or Italian, and they're learning them at the exact same time. It's an experiment.
That's gotta be tough.
Really, really cool.
Yeah.
The only things, well, I've studied Mandarin and Esperanto at the same time, but that's pretty easy to keep separated in your head.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I'm currently studying, but I don't really count it because I have a really solid base in Esperanto and Spanish, so I don't mix them up because I do have and I wouldn't have done it if I didn't have already a semi-established base in Spanish, because I think that studying two similar languages, if you have that base, is fine. I think if you're going into it new, it's probably going to be a completely different story. But man, I just have it's like I have language ADD. And honestly,
I totally feel
dabbling probably isn't that good. And I should be the example of that, because I would consider myself, I've been studying languages for 9 years. It's something I want to do, and
right.
I would consider myself bilingual, and that's Esperanto and English.
Sure.
And that's a very low grade bilingual in Esperanto. So
yeah. Depends
I can
on
read a lot more. So
yeah, it's funny that you bring up the polyglot. Is polyglot progress? That's what's that? Matt and is it Jennifer
Matt and,
or something? I know who you're talking about. Abigail, yeah. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I haven't seen their videos of learning Italian and Spanish at the same time, but that seems like, to me, that does seem like a really bad idea. But at the same time, like, when I say it sounds like a really bad idea, I'm not judging them on that. I actually think it's really interesting, because I
think it's a fun experiment.
Yeah, and that's what it is. I mean, I assume that's what they're doing it as an experiment, right? Like, just to see. And you learn so much more about yourself when you do this stuff. And that's, I can't blame them, because that's why I learned Tokipona. I put my Spanish and my Esperanto learning on hold so that I could learn another language that I had no intention of retaining, right? And that's kind of how I see dabbling a lot. So, another aspect of dabbling in Greek and Romanian and some of these other languages that has really stuck out to me is I might not remember how to speak any of the actual language, but I remember aspects of it. So Greek was the first language I ever started learning that had a case system, and that seemed so foreign to me.
Yeah.
And I remember first learning Spanish when I was 14 years old. And learning about these verb conjugations. And I was like, what? Why do you have to say that with the verb? Why can't I just say, I walk?
Yep.
Why do we need a different verb for every person? But you start to notice these weird things that languages can do. Case systems, evidential markers, verb conjugations, different ways of using prepositions, grammatical gender. And you think, why would a language do that? But then these things start to stick out to you. So I'm guessing that maybe one potential benefit of dabbling in a ton of different languages is that you start to kind of see what languages can do as a whole. Even if you don't remember anything from those languages. So what has your experience been with that? You said you don't remember any Japanese, or you can't speak any of these, other languages that you've learned, but do you retain some of the information at least about how those languages work?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the big thing is, like you just said, the takeaways from it. I've now realized, especially through studying Esperanto, where there is no verb conjugations, I now understand why verb conjugations are actually super important.
Mm-hmm.
Because the pronouns in Esperanto sound really similar, and if you're speaking to somebody who speaks so fast, you don't know if he said he, she, they, me, and so that can get so from Spanish, for example, I used to hate conjugations, and now I'm like, you know what? Those suck. But I know that if somebody says dejaste, I know that they mean you left.
Right.
Versus, you know what I mean? And I don't have to even think about the pronoun.
Pronoun is really unnecessary.
Yeah. Now, the other things that I've taken away, especially from languages with gender, and not specifically three-gendered languages like German, but again, Spanish or French or anything like that, is you can be way more descriptive without having to be.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I was telling you I'm meeting a lawyer, I could say la abogada.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm meeting a female lawyer. Not that that's necessarily important, but you can be more descriptive.
Yeah. And in some cases it might be,
Sure, yeah, oh, absolutely.
It might clear up confusion, if someone had a male lawyer in mind, and then you say la abogada, well, you just gave them some information that, cleared up a little bit of confusion, because now they know which lawyer you're talking about,
Right. And that's a way, to be more descriptive without being like, yeah, I have a female lawyer that I'm going to see or whatever.
Right.
You know,
that would sound totally weird in English if you're just like,
yeah,
there's a lady lawyer that I'm going to go talk to.
Yeah. So I like that.
Right.
And then I think the other things that it's helped me with is just like you said, the kind of loosely translating, like we talked about Esperanto. Like, for example, in Spanish is just from where it's my strongest stuff. It's where I naturally gravitate towards, or not strongest, but strongest than Esperanto. Like if you're saying something is close to something, or like you would say, acerca or cerca. I always say cerca and acerca. Cerca.
Yeah.
But you don't say cerca la puerto. You would say cerca de la puerto.
Yeah,
so
they
it's
have
like
different.
Close of the door, or
right.
You know.
Yeah, I actually, now that you mentioned that, that is weird. That feels totally normal to me in Spanish to say cerca de, but now that you mention it, like what?
Yeah, close of the door.
Close of.
I'm sure
that's funny.
Means something else, but that's just how we translate it in English. But
yeah,
you know, so I've taken just like grammar. It helps me kind of understand more. Like I think the more that you dabble in stuff like that, it can help you fine tune the idea that not every language has the exact same structure that your language does.
Yeah. And not only will dabbling in all these languages help you like learn what grammatical features can be included in language, like case, evidential markers, verb conjugations and stuff. It can also show you some aspects of your own language that are unnecessary, right? Like verb tense. To me, it just seems like totally natural that, of course you have to have tense on your verbs. Like if I walked to the store yesterday, then why would I not have to include the ED on my walk? But learning languages like Tokipona, this is another reason that I'm really interested in learning Mandarin. Like, no, you don't have to include the ED. It's still completely explicit about when you were walking if you say, I walked to the store yesterday. Like, why does that even have to be a thing? First of all, it could at least be optional, right? Like, if I want to say when something took place, or if it's really important for me to say it, then just say it in those instances, right? But for whatever reason, in English, you are required to tell when a certain action took place relevant to the present time.
Yep. Yeah, it's super weird. I've actually heard some arguments, too, that English is... Because, like, there's in Japanese, there's only two tenses. There's past and present. And, like, they do a weird thing with the future. I think that's correct. I was watching, actually, one of Langfocus's videos, and he was talking about it.
Okay.
But I've also heard people argue that really and truly English only has two tenses, and then there's like what the heck is it, man? I watched the whole video on it, and I can't remember it now.
Well, in English, we have the present... We only conjugate for two tenses, really. We conjugate for the present tense and for the past tense. But we also have the past perfect, and then you use an auxiliary verb for the future.
Yep.
But you could also analyze English as having 12 tenses. Because we have 3 tenses and 4 aspects. So you can say, like, I walked, I had walked, I had been walking. I'm missing one. But it's not important. Like, there's different ways of analyzing it.
Right. And really and truly, it's just like when I was struggling in Esperanto with the inta, anta, onta things, that just makes it a little bit more descriptive. But if I just simply say, me marchis, it's okay, it's an action, it's walking, and it happened.
Right.
So you still get the point across, it just might not be as descriptive as you want.
And in a lot of languages, they don't have that distinction between I walk and I am walking. That's like something it's hard for us English speakers to grasp that in other languages, that I walk can be used interchangeably with I am walking. right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's because it's literally just present tense. Present tense. I eat apple. I am either eating an apple or I do eat apples.
right.
Whatever. Cool.
Yeah, with the regular standard present tense in English, it's I eat apples on a regular basis, or it's a habitual action. But I am eating an apple is much more immediate. It's happening right now. But so this is so like fundamental to us as native English speakers that it's hard to see a world where those two things could be expressed as the same way. Like, no, I can't express these two different things with the same word. I need different words to describe something that happens on a regular basis and a different word that happens that describes something that's happening right now. Yep. Right? Like, and I don't know why. It's hard to get your mind around that when you're learning a new language.
Yeah, and see, to me, I love simplicity. So
yeah. So you're gonna love Tokipona.
Yeah. So when I started learning Esperanto, and it was doing the I eat, and it would accept both I eat apples or I am eating an apple, or I eat apple, or whatever, I eat an apple versus I am eating an apple. Like, I love simplicity. Because to me, it sounds more complicated than it is, but really as an English speaker, if somebody came up to you and said, I ate an apple, it's honestly not necessarily overly important as to whether or not it's happening now or if it's a regular thing.
Right. And
so I think that's something that we maybe convolute with difficulty that's not really necessary. Like,
yeah. And a lot of that has to do with pragmatics. You can say one thing in one situation and everyone understands what you mean, and you say the exact same sentence in a different situation and everyone understands what you mean there. Right? Like, let's say you join the Peace Corps and you go off to Africa and you're living in your new hut and you're having a phone call with your mom, and your mom says, do you have a bathroom? And you say, yeah, we have a bathroom. Well, it's actually an outhouse in the back, and your mom is asking for information. Do you have a bathroom? Right? But if you're here in the United States, you're throwing a party, people come over, someone comes up to you and says, do you have a bathroom? Then you could say, yeah, I have a bathroom. Right? And they would look at you like,
right.
Okay, I wasn't asking for information.
Yeah, I was asking like location.
I was requesting for you to tell me where your bathroom is so I can use it. Right? But us humans are really good, and this goes back to what we said at the very beginning of this video. Like, language is way more complicated than we think. And we humans are really good at understanding what someone means by a given set of words based on the context of the situation. So a lot of that ambiguity in language is cleared up, and a lot of the things that we do and say are not necessary in order to communicate a really explicit message.
Right. And that's one thing dabbling has taught me is sometimes we have a habit of looking too far into things that we like just accept it.
Right.
Like, I can't remember. There was one specific incident that, one of the things I was struggling with in Spanish was reflexive verbs. And for some reason, going through Esperanto, even though it does have me sentis mean, or, like, you have to kind of reflect that back to yourself. For whatever reason, even though it's not really the same thing, like, getting through that lesson on Duolingo and kind of studying it a little bit, I don't have near as much trouble as using reflexive verbs in Spanish.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
It's weird how these languages are symbiotic like that.
Yeah. It's super, super, like, I still struggle. I think my biggest struggle now is just actually recognizing which verbs have to be used in a reflexive manner. Sure. That's kind of my struggle.
Sure.
But if I know that it's supposed to be used, then that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for coming on, man. I think I'm going to wrap it up here.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It was super fun.
Yeah.
You know me, man. I can talk languages.
Oh, I know. I know. You and me both, man. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess I've never done this before, so I guess I'm just going to wrap it up like this. But thanks for coming on, and I am definitely down for talking languages on the show again sometime. On the show, I talk like I have a regular podcast. But, on my channel, anytime. Yeah, I love talking languages, and I know a lot of people love listening in on languages. So, all right. We'll see you.